Hi everyone, and welcome to video number 12 on Henry VIII and his ministers. And this video, ladies and gentlemen, it's all about the fall of Cardinal Wolsey, the end of Wolsey's influence over King Henry VIII. If you remember the previous video, we were looking at the failure of Wolsey in getting the marriage between Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon annulled. This was the key point. Remember, there was a case, the evidence was heard at Blackfriars Court in London. That finished in July 1529. The Cardinal Campeggio, the Pope's representative, returning to Italy. The final decision would be made in Rome. And as we found out in the previous video, Pope Clement said no. There was no annulment. Henry VIII was unhappy. Cardinal Wolsey had failed. What would happen next? That's what this video is all about. By October 1529, Wolsey has had his power reduced, he's had possessions removed, he was sent away from Henry in exile up to York. By November 1530, things were getting even worse for Wolsey. Why? I'll get to later in this video. All of a sudden, Wolsey was being called back to London because he'd been charged with a very, very serious offence. To use the Latin, praemunire. Put that in English for us, treason. Betraying the king. Because people were accusing Wolsey of putting the Pope above the king. Wow, that was serious. Wolsey had to make his way south from York down to London, where there would have been a trial. And I think most historians agree that the end result, the verdict of that trial, ladies and gentlemen, would have been a meeting with our friend, the executioner's axe. There is no doubt that Wolsey would have had an accident. Sorry about that terrible pun. No more. But Wolsey cheated the executioner because on his way south, by now he was an old man, he'd been unwell for quite a while, and the rigours of the journey, he got as far south as Leicester, where he took very ill and died. So Wolsey died before the trial. Now, sometimes in the exam, and we'll have a look at this. Let's put my exam hat on. Here's a question that you sometimes get in this paper. The main reason Wolsey fell from power was the influence of the Boleyns. How far do you agree? Use the following in your answer. Anne Boleyn, Pope Clement. You must also use information of your own. 16 marks. Well, how would you go about answering that? Why did Wolsey fall from power? That's the key question. The answer for that? There were many reasons. But to try and help you remember those reasons, let's keep things really, really simple. Let's keep things as easy as ABC. Easy as 1, 2, 3. ABC. Or, in this case, for Wolsey, ABCDE. Now, what am I on about? Well, let's have a little look. Here are the reasons why Wolsey fell, why he lost his power. A. Annulment. B. Boleyns. C. Charles V. D. Decision. E. Enemies. Let's have a look at them. 5 reasons. The first one, the annulment. Possibly the main reason, ladies and gentlemen. We know Henry desperately wanted the marriage annulled. He was in love with Anne Boleyn. He wanted to marry Anne Boleyn and hopefully have a son with Anne Boleyn. Despite all of Wolsey's efforts, his wheeler dealing, his persuasion, his use of the Bible, all of this failed. The annulment did not happen. King Henry was very unhappy. Wolsey's position had been weakened, and in a weaker position it allowed his enemies to pounce. Well, let's have a look at some of these enemies. B, the Boleyns. There it is, the Boleyn family. Now, I've already mentioned Anne Boleyn, soon to be the next queen. The Boleyns were a group or a faction, a family at the court of King Henry. Anne, obviously, wanted to marry Henry. She wanted the power. She didn't like Wolsey because Wolsey had power and influence over Henry, and Anne did not want that. Who else was in the faction? Well, there was Anne's sister, Mary, who'd been a previous mistress of Henry VIII. The father, Thomas Boleyn, very ambitious for his daughters. The brother, George Boleyn, very ambitious for his sister. This family wanted to take power, wanted to control and influence King Henry. That's what they are after, ladies and gentlemen. Now, in the past, Wolsey had always defeated other powers who were trying to challenge him. If you remember video 5, go and look it up, the Eltham Ordinances, Wolsey had kept control. But not this time. Remember, Wolsey is weak. Why is he weak? Because he hasn't got the annulment. So the annulment allowed the Boleyns to pounce. They are linked together. Now, the Boleyns were able to whisper in King Henry's ear, oh, the reason he didn't get you the annulment was Wolsey favours Catherine of Aragon, whispering poison in Henry's ear at a time when Wolsey is weak. That's part of the reason for his downfall. The C, Charles V, Emperor Charles V. Well, what role did he play in the downfall of Wolsey? Take that off. Now, from 1525 to 1529, Wolsey had advised, he'd guided Henry, and he was saying, look, England, Henry, we need to make alliance, friendships with France against Charles. But then Charles wins a very big battle, the Battle of Pavia against the French. It allowed Charles to control Pope Clement. If Charles is controlling Pope Clement, remember he imprisoned him at one stage, will Pope Clement allow the annulment and upset Charles? Of course not. Later, 1529, a peace treaty, the Treaty of Cambrai between France and the Emperor, brought peace between the two. England was now weak and isolated. It seems as if Wolsey's judgment has been flawed. For the first time, Henry was questioning Wolsey's judgment. And his judgment, his actions, his decisions had led to no annulment. So put them together and Wolsey becomes weaker. But despite these enemies, it's Henry wearing the crown who has the power. So it has to be Henry's decision. Despite factions like the Boleyns, Henry has to make the final decision. And in 1529, Wolsey's fate, his future, was uncertain. Yes, Henry had taken key posts, key positions of power away from Wolsey. But then, when he sent him up to exile in York, he then sent him supportive messages. So it seems as if he's sending conflicting messages to Wolsey. Will Wolsey be able to ride through the storm? Maybe. Henry knew that Wolsey had given him good advice in the past. That was true. But Wolsey's enemies, remember, whispering in Henry's ear, they're saying, look, we've got evidence that Wolsey has written letters to Charles, Francis of France, Pope Clement, all going against Anne Boleyn. That's what they were saying to King Henry. Now, Henry was not sure if it was true, but he believed it. And when he believed that Wolsey had been deliberately going against Anne Boleyn, there was no way back. Because remember, Henry's desperate to marry Anne Boleyn. So they are turning Henry away from Wolsey. The D. It was Henry's decision, helped by the enemies, whispering in his ear. And the final one on our ABCDE. I've talked about the enemies. Well, who were they? And why were they enemies? I've already mentioned the Boleyns. Here's the arrow linking, remember. So some of the Boleyns were the enemies. But Wolsey had others. Wow. Let's have a look. Who's the enemies? He had many enemies. Why? Well, the court of King Henry, people who were there were all mad for power, wealth, ambition. It was a very cutthroat, dog-eat-dog place to try and exist. Wolsey had been top dog for quite a while, despite his very, very modest background. Remember, a butcher's boy? The rich nobles, for example, the Duke of Norfolk, the Duke of Suffolk, they resented this. They didn't like it. They were envious. They were jealous. They were quite snobby. Oh, look at him. He's only a butcher's boy. And yet he's got the ear of the king. That should be our job because we're rich, powerful noblemen. That's why they didn't like Wolsey. Secondly, Wolsey was rich and he showed off his wealth. This upset many people. Thirdly, I've mentioned in the past about Wolsey's reforms of justice, the enclosures, land, the amicable grants. These had upset people. So many people were waiting for the chance to take their revenge and get rid of Wolsey. Finally, with the failure to win the annulment, they saw their opportunity. Now they could act against Cardinal Wolsey, their enemy. So if you are asked a question, let's go back to it. The main reason Wolsey fell from power was the influence of the Boleyns. How far do you agree? Well, there are at least 5 reasons the Boleyns are there. How would you get good marks on this? Well, there we go. You would have to write about the Boleyns, say the role that they played in overthrowing Wolsey, pouring poison in the king's ear. So you'd have to mention them. But notice the question is the main reason. Were they the main reason? Or was there another main reason? Well, possibly looking at that, you might argue that the main reason was the annulment. And you'd have to explain why that really weakened the position of Wolsey, because that was the one that upset King Henry. If Wolsey had got the annulment, would the Boleyns have been able to get rid of Wolsey? Probably not, because they'd already got he'd done Henry's wishes and got the annulment. It also says, use the following, Anne Boleyn. You explain why Anne Boleyn was important. I've just explained in this video. It mentions Pope Clement. Well, you can use Pope Clement to say why he didn't give the annulment. Because of Charles V. So can you see, that would allow you to answer this question. The main reason Wolsey fell from power was the influence of the Boleyns. How far do you agree? One paragraph on the Boleyns, another paragraph on the annulment, another paragraph on Pope Clement and Charles V, another paragraph maybe on all the enemies who didn't like Wolsey. Linking them together, the way I've linked them there. The Boleyns linked with the annulment, Charles V linked with the annulment, enemies linked with the Boleyns. But it was Henry's decision. Why did he get rid of Wolsey? Probably that. So if you're saying the main reason was the annulment, you are disagreeing with the question. But that's okay, so long as you can give your evidence and build your arguments. So there we have just an example of a GCSE question. The fall of Cardinal Wolsey. And with the fall of Wolsey, cheated the Axeman. With the fall of Wolsey, we end our first topic. The second topic's on the way. Wolsey has gone as Chief Minister. But there was a replacement, ladies and gentlemen. Who was that? And that is the start of the second topic, because the second topic is all about the replacement of Cardinal Wolsey. Thomas Wolsey has gone to be replaced by another Thomas, Thomas Cromwell. Coming soon, the rise of Thomas Cromwell. As ever, I hope it's been useful. Speak to you soon. All the best now.